with the first pick in the NFL draft.
Hello and welcome to the Franchise Tag Draft Show. We have a mid-season special for you. Me, your host, Andrew, joined by Adam as always. We are going to be going through all the NFL teams' mid-season needs for the future. Adam, you looking forward to this one? It's a bit of an interesting one halfway through the season. Bit of guesswork going on.
I haven't seen that draft intro in ages. It's about time that we had it back. Yeah, this should be fun. Look, the draft. We love the draft stuff. It's never too early to talk about the draft, is it? So that's what's important. And we kind of figured that at the moment, given the fact that we're week 8 this weekend that we're looking at when we've recorded this. So we're looking at potential holes, problems that we're starting to see already, not necessarily first round picks for every team, but just sort of like where we think the holes are, what we think they're going to need to do, who might disappear because they become free agents. And I know you've got a few potential names to throw out there of the guys coming into the draft next year. So yeah, it should be exciting, and lots of holes. There's a lot of bad teams this year, I've noticed already.
Lots of bad teams. Well, maybe
yeah.
the game's just changing a bit. I think we're going through that transitional phase where you're going to have this. Like, I remember when we first ever started watching, it was just a statue quarterback in the pocket throwing the ball around. You had massive guys on the O-line, and you had like huge guys at linebacker and things like that. And the game sort of adapted and changed, and it sort of exposed new holes that weren't there, I think. So I think we're in a bit of a period where teams just are going through that transitional phase where they need to get with the times now, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of bad teams as well, though. So we're gonna, stick with that. There are some. I mean, as you can see, the first division that we're going to be doing, there's a couple of bad teams in this division. So it's like there's a few bad teams out there that need a bit of help.
Well, as you can see, we have got the AFC East up already. Adam, we'll start with the first one I'd say on the list, and that is the Buffalo Bills. Where do you see their holes and errors at the moment?
So a bit of a difficult one, really, with the Bills, because they are a pretty decent side. They look like that they definitely feel like, to me, that they're going to be playoff bound this year again, and that they haven't got anything that I would say is massively, massive problems. I think that there are a few. I think not their biggest need. I think wide receiver is a bit of a sneaky issue that they probably need to go for. They've got Shakir, they've got Coleman, but they still haven't got that sort. And obviously Amari Cooper has come in since then. But it kind of feels a little bit like maybe just for some depth, I think they might want to go wide receiver. And then really the big issue that I think is probably the D-line. I think that's where that they do need to bring in some more guys and some help. They've got a few free agents on the interior. AJ Epinesa is going to be a free agent, so if they don't bring him back, then he's definitely someone that they need to replace. And Von Miller is just getting another year older as well, and it just kind of feels a little bit like the reason that the Bills have been so successful defensively is that they have rotated, they have continually brought in new guys, and I think that is somewhere that they probably need to look at. The only other area that I did sort of see that I thought might be of interest is corner, just purely because Rasul Douglas is going to be 30 next year, so that's a potential issue as well. But I do feel like it's I'm not saying that they need to go round one defense, but I just think that there's a few little holes on the defense that actually might end up costing them this year. Yeah,
I thought possible. I mean, they've got Greg Rousseau, I think is fantastic. He is on the D-line, but aside from that, they do need to make sure they get more pressure on the quarterback. I think when you look at it and you say, oh, maybe they need something in the secondary at cornerback, safety, things like that. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's more pressure on the quarterback and giving those cornerbacks and safeties more times, because there is some talent in that backfield. They are all young as well. So, yeah, I do think that. And do you think there's no chance that they bring Cooper back in the wide receiver? Because if they do, I think that combination of Coleman, Cooper, and Shakir is a really nice trio. Each have got a very different skill set, and it seems to work quite well.
Yeah, I think if they do decide to do that, obviously that's a that would sort of like take out the wide receiver position as a need. It is very much a case of they're going to have to restructure his contract and sort of look into that and do a new deal for him if that's what they want to do. I think it's probably a lot of it is going to be dependent based on how he does this season for them and how it works. But yeah, if that happens, I still think they're probably going to want to look at wide receiver as in like someone, I don't know, day 3. Just someone a long way back, and they're going to want to look at that anyway, just as a depth piece. But yeah, I think wherever Cooper's gone, he's done really well. So you would kind of hope that would continue. So I think that you're probably looking at that as though he will stick around.
What's their salary cap looking like next year? If they got room to bring in a big free agent in this position, or will they need to look at the draft to sort of fill these holes? What are they looking at like in terms of cap space?
So their cap space for this year, if you look at the I tend to look at the effective cap space rather than the actual cap space, because obviously it takes out the practice squad and all that. But if you look at the effective one, basically they're looking at 2.2 million, which is not a lot. It's very tight already. And I think because of that, it does go to show that free agents might be a bit of a struggle for them this year, in 2025 even. So I think that would be a potential issue for them. So yeah, I think that draft-wise, they're probably going to want to look at, trying to get as many guys as they can.
And where would you sort of say their one biggest need is then?
I think probably when you look at it, it is the D line. It is a case of just guys getting older and people becoming free agents. And if you can't re-sign them because of the cap, then it does become more of a problem. So I think that they're probably going to want to look at the D line. Whether they go interior or edge, I think it's because of where they're probably going to be in the draft. It's almost going to be a case of picking the best player that they can at either position. So I think that's most likely where they're going to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's if they go interior, there is a couple of guys in the draft. I mean, you're not going to get at where they are in the draft. You're not going to get one of the main edge rushers. So I think maybe interior, there is some really, really talented guys on there. I'd probably dip into the Ohio State pot as well for that. If you take a look at some of their names. I thought
you might. It's funny isn't it? Of all the teams, you want to dip in the Ohio State pot.
They've got some great guys up front that all returned. I think if you're looking at sort of like a Tyleik Williams or a Jack Sawyer, I think, guys like that, both from Ohio State, that they'll be really effective. If not, there's a guy that I really like at Ole Miss. He has had a couple of injuries, but he's been absolutely dominant this year, and that's Princey Umanamalian. I hope I pronounced that right, because he pronounces it very, very different to other people. So the commentators even struggle with that. But I think he's really, really good. He can play inside and outside, so he's the perfect opportunity for them. Big guy, real good, really, really explosive as well. So they can address that D-line on it. I think that might be the correct thing to do. I think the talent level that you're going to get at the D-line position in the draft is going to be higher than what they're going to get at cornerback this year, later on in the draft. So maybe they can bring in another veteran cornerback within free agency on the cheap. Have you got the names of the cornerbacks do you know the cornerbacks that are on the free agency?
No, not really. Because I haven't really looked at it too much as to what's coming out in the draft, so I haven't really checked. But it's I think the corner is certainly a need that they might want to look at. I'm too busy in the NFL season at the moment to be looking at that stuff.
Yeah, so for me, I'd say D-line, go to the draft, free agency, cornerback. That would be the one for me. Any more for the Buffalo Bills before we move on to the next team?
No, that's it really. Like I said, I think most of it's D-line for me.
Okay, so next up, we have got the New England Patriots. Plenty of holes on this team. This is probably what you're alluding to as a team that isn't very good. They're probably going to be looking to have the number one pick in the draft. They look like they've found their franchise quarterback. Drake May has looked decent through his first couple of games, has been able to move the ball to a more efficient way than they have done through the start of the season. Where's their main needs, though, Adam? Because they've got a lot of needs on here.
So I think their main lead for me definitely is the O-line. I think, and to be brutally honest, you can pretty much go anywhere across it. It is going to be a case of getting the main guy that you find. I think that the O-line, it's a bit of a save Drake May kind of mission is what I think they're going to have to attempt to do here. And so because of that, I think the O-line is most important. I don't really mind where you go on it. I just think it's a case of just trying to find the best player available at the time for that. Because at the end of the day, like you say, it feels like they have found their guy and they need to keep him upright and keep him safe as much as possible. So O-line is a big one. I think corner as well. I think corner is a big one that they need to go for. Jonathan Jones is going to be a free agent next year. So that's definitely one that they need to look at potentially trying to find someone. Obviously, they've got Christian Gonzalez, who is great, but you need someone on the other side. So I think that's definitely something that they need to be looking at. And then this isn't, again, kind of similar to the Bills, not necessarily the biggest need. They've got more important things that they need to be looking at because they do have some good wide receivers, or certainly some wide receivers with potential anyway. But I do feel like they're missing a number one guy. And that's something like if they could really go out and get themselves like a proper stud wide receiver, obviously you'd have to do that very early in the draft in order to do that. But that might be the way forward for them as well. And I feel like this is the Bengals Joe Burrow decision of O-line wide receiver. And it's like, because realistically, you are talking about a team here who at the moment are number one. That's in the draft order. They probably won't be number one. They'd probably trade back if they finish there. But they have the potential to go out and get the best wide receiver in the draft. And there are some good wide receivers, not great, but there are a couple of really, really good potential wide receivers here. And it feels like you could go down that route if you wanted to. So they're my three ones, but I would come out and say your biggest need for the Patriots is the O-line desperately.
Yeah, there's no names on that O-line either. It's just a bunch of no's in my eyes. It needs a full overhaul, doesn't it? So I think they need some quality veteran help first off, and then bring in some youngsters that could potentially air and future the tackle positions, maybe start them off at guard and move them in. So you're kind of getting a bit of a rotation system. So with that in mind, I think maybe free agency might be a look for them for a really solid left tackle, right tackle, whatever you want to take, and then dip in the later rounds, because there's going to be a plethora of big guys in the later rounds 2, 3, 4 of guys that can explode into the NFL in the interior of an offensive line. So I think maybe dip in there. With the number one pick that we all think they're going to have, they could kill two birds with one stone here. You said they're struggling for a number one wide receiver and a duo cornerback. They could go Travis Hunter with the first pick and tick off both those positions. They could have what could be the number one cornerback in football and a guy that is vying with the likes of T-Mac and Burden and people like that for the best wide receiver in college as well. Would you think they'd just go, yeah, he's the best player, he's an absolute unicorn, we can't pass up, we're taking him number one? Or do you think they could move back a couple of positions and either still take him or take one of the big linemen in a Will Campbell or a Banks or something like that? What do you see them doing when it comes to that?
I would be surprised if they used the number one pick if they had it. I feel like any team now who has the number one pick that has a quarterback is just never going to use it. They're always going to trade back, and whether that be a couple of spots or whether that be something like what we saw with the Bears and the Panthers when they moved back 9 spots, wasn't it? So I think that's what you're what you're going to see, where it's like they're just going to do that. And then, yeah, they could go for someone like Travis Hunter. I don't, but then you sort of think to yourself, I don't know if Travis Hunter's necessarily going to be sort of like right at the very top. I mean, he'll be in the top 10. I think that's a fair assessment for him, but I don't know if he'll necessarily be the top couple, because just the way that the draft works and people come up for quarterbacks even when they're not necessarily at that value. So I think that because of that, there are lots of options that the Patriots are going to have. And I think even if they're not with the number one pick, say they're number 2, number 3, I think they're still going to have these options as well. So it's like they don't have to go mental. And another thing with the sort of like the options, as you were saying about free agency, they're currently at the top of the cap space that they have. They've got 116 million, so they can just go on a spending spree. They can do that if they wanted to. So they could bring in veterans for that O-line, completely forget about going O-line in the first round, and then go and get one of them stud wide receivers. It is something that they could do. So yeah, they've got loads of options, lots of holes, but it's one of them things where, because of where they're going to be in the draft and because of the cap space that they have, maybe it might not take too long for them to be able to turn it around and suddenly become a bit more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the names that are also in with them at the top of that draft, the likes of Carolina, Cleveland Browns, Tennessee Titans, they're all probably going to be looking at quarterback as well. It's not as if they could move back behind those 3, someone come up for the quarterback and still get Travis Hunter if they want that unicorn in the draft. I know people always like to move up for people that are special talent, so I can see them going within the top 10 quite comfortably. If the top teams go quarterback, I can see them go top 5, 6, maybe. Definitely. Just going to briefly try and have a quick look at some of the names that are on free agency come the season. Okay, so yeah, they could Walker Little is a free agent, guy tackle from Jacksonville. I thought he might get traded before the trade deadline. I think he's a candidate in there, but if he doesn't and he manages it, that could be a great position for him to go to. He's only going to be always going to be 26 next year, so I think that's a nice one. Equally, I know he's not had the greatest of seasons start to his career, but Mekhi Becton, also a guy that was a first-round pick, also a free agent next year and still young. So there's some talented youngsters going into free agency on that offensive line at right tackle, left tackle as well. So I think definitely dip into free agency for that position. Adam, we move on to another team. I was going to say the New York Jet Packers. Not sure what we're calling them at the minute. Maybe just the New York Jets for now. Obviously, brought in some free agents already in Devontae Adams. Not really sure. I would have thought if you're bringing in Adams halfway through the season, it doesn't make it. Maybe Rodgers comes back for another year. I don't know. It's going to be a circus come the off season for this Jets team. What can you see them doing? Because there might be a complete new front office. There might be a new quarterback. The defenses look good at times. Offense looks like it's got all the weapons. It's got 2 fantastic youngsters in Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So where's the holes on this team, and what do you see the future for these?
So my main, I did this, and then obviously the Devontae Adams trade happened. The main one that I had was wide receiver. Obviously they've brought him in, but Mike Williams and Alan Lazard are both free agents come the end of this year.
They'll bring Lazard back, won't they?
Well, you would expect Lazard to come back if Rodgers comes back. Obviously, that would kind of make sense. But you're still sort of like losing out on someone there in the fact that you've no longer, I can't imagine Mike Williams is going to be there. And when you look at the rest of the wide receivers, like you say, it's Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, and I suppose Alan Lazard as your third is probably enough for you to get through. So it's not too bad. I think the tight end is somewhere they could look at. I don't think any of their tight ends are particularly great. And I must admit, I don't really know because I haven't looked too much into it, but there are a lot of people out there saying it's quite a good tight end class this year, and there's a few tight ends that actually look pretty good. So that's one area that I do think they might go to. And then finally, I think corner is an area that they need a bit of help with, because DJ Reed is a free agent when it comes to next season, so that's going to be a problem. Obviously, you've got Sauce Gardner, who's great, but once you get past that, it is a big drop off if you're not going to pay DJ Reed. They do have the money to do it. They've got about 40 million in the cap, so they could go out and pay him if they wanted to. But at the same time, if you're bringing Lazard back and there are other people, who knows what's going to happen with like Hassan Riddick and stuff like that. So it kind of feels a little bit like, is DJ Reed going to be the guy that you really want to pump a lot of money into? So there is that concern. And then finally, the only other one, and I feel like they have invested in this area a little bit, and that they've got some good, they've got good players there, but it's just keeping them fit. It's the O-line. And just keeping that O-line fit. The likes of Morgan Moses, we said, didn't we, at the beginning of the season, what's the chance of him actually staying fit for the whole season? And he's been injured already this season.
Yeah. Moses and Smith, both right and left. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like it's really, really difficult. And you've spent money to bring these guys in, but it kind of hasn't really worked. So, yeah, I think that's kind of where your main areas are. I think defensively, like your D-line, I think you're fine. I think you're in a pretty good state there. And especially if you can get Hassan Reddick back as well, then that's even better for you. So I think defensively, the front seven are all right. I think it is corner is an area that is of need if DJ Reed doesn't come back. And then, like I say, tight end, an O-line, they shouldn't really have many holes. They should be all in. This is kind of the point. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's a funny situation where when you actually look through them, there's not a ton of holes, but at the same time, they're not really performing. So you kind of feel like maybe they do need to change a few things up.
With this being a look at the future for teams, would you not say their biggest need is quarterback? Because we're uncertain of whether he'll come back next year. I think the way it's going, we think he might. But then what after that? They've got a potential to be in a position to get a quarterback in this draft. Do you think this is the one to do it in?
So this is a real problem, isn't it? Because obviously, like we all know that. I mean, how is Rodgers going to react to that? Because previously, not very well. So this is the issue with this. It's very much a case of, do you go in and get yourself a quarterback? I think probably what you do is you do get one, but you get one further back in the draft. I think you're looking at maybe a day 2 pick, potentially even a day 3 pick, I think is what you're looking at, rather than going for someone who's going to be a bigger name in this year's draft. So I think maybe that's the idea. You do that, you try and develop them and see how that goes. And if that works, great. And if it doesn't, well, you didn't spend too much draft capital on them, so it's okay. But I think you've got to be they have to understand who they're dealing with here a little bit. And it's like, if he's going to be there next year, the idea of going out first round, picking a quarterback, that's going to just cause more trouble than it's worth.
I suppose where they're sat at the draft now as well, we've already mentioned that the teams above them might go quarterback or moved out. That might leave them sat in a position to take the best cornerback in the draft. Will Johnson from Michigan is going to be sat there waiting. And I think, we've seen him in their championship run. And then this season, with why they've been struggling, he's been stepping up and doing the goods as well. So they're sat in a nice position to have their pick of cornerbacks if they choose not to go quarterback in the draft. Do you feel like that's what they should do and maybe address again? They've got older guys on that offensive line, but like we said, you can get multiple guys later on in the draft on the O-line.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at first round, then I think you do have to sort of come to a decision whether you want to invest in DJ Reed or not. And probably the argument is that why would you? kind of thing when you can go out and, like you say, get yourself the best corner and have that person opposite Sauce Gardner. I think that's the way forward. More often than not, as we always know, when it comes to first round picks, normally the best teams are the ones that do invest heavily in their defense when it comes to first round picks and sort of day 2 picks as well. So yeah, I think that's the way forward, that you do want to go out and get yourself the best corner and reset that. So because also the other thing is, I know it's not next year, but you're gonna have to pay Sauce at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's coming up. So it's like you do have to think about it, not just a case of like, oh, just next year, but what have you got in the future as well? So you're gonna have to pay him. So it does feel like the right move, because then obviously the guy on the opposite side will be like paying on his rookie contract, so that'll be a lot cheaper for him.
Yeah, definitely. And then we move on to our final team, the Miami Dolphins. This is a team that spent a lot of money on their offense, paying their quarterback, their wide receivers. I know the A-Chain will eventually have to get paid soon as well. I personally think they've still need to spend some more money on that defense. I think they let a lot of people go from it. They brought in some new names, but people still just get injured, and it's not got the quality to come in off of the bench and fill those spots. Are you in agreement, Adam? Do you think that's where their holes are, or do you think just spend more on offense and beat people by outscoring them completely?
So if you look at their cap space for next year, you're looking at currently minus 11 million. So we're not spending anything. Free agents are not coming in. They're going to really struggle in order to be able to do anything here. I just think, although defensively, I do agree with you. They lost a lot, didn't they, on the defense during the last off season. I just don't think it's the most important needs for them. I think they're back to where they have been for the previous 2 or 3 years, and they haven't really looked into it properly, and they haven't really done it properly. For me, the O-line desperately needs help. I think Eichenberg has struggled quite a bit this season. I think Armstead obviously keeps on picking up injuries, so that's another problem that they're having there. And at the end of the day, as we've seen this season, if you cannot keep Tua on the field, then it all falls apart. So it doesn't matter, in a way, it almost doesn't matter how good your defense is, because you just can't do anything on the offense. So to me, there's 2 major issues. The O-line, in which, to be brutally honest, as I said, I think you would stick with Armstead because he is just that good. I know he picks up injuries, but it's like he is just that good. But anywhere else on that O-line, I think you could bring someone in. And then quite possibly the biggest mistake that they made, why didn't you go out and get someone like Joe Flacco? Like, why did that not happen? And that you can't have someone, if you're gonna continue with Tua, which is fine because you paid him, and he's back in this week 8, and we'll see how he does. If you're going to continue to do that, you have to have a relatively decent quarterback behind him in case of an injury again. And Skylar Thompson isn't that. And Mike White, who he beat out, isn't that either. And you need to do that. And you don't have the money in free agency in order to bring in a veteran now. So I really think that, firstly, the O-line to save Tua, and then the quarterback in case you can't save Tua, is basically what you need to be doing in the draft.
I mean, currently, we've already said they won't be bringing people in through free agency. They might have to lose some players as well. I mean, currently they are sat at 10th. I don't see them being 10th come the end of the season. Now Tua's back. They're going to be a lot further down that list. So I think a lot of the good offensive tackles might be gone before they pick. So it might be worth them sitting and waiting. I don't know. There is some talented guys still in it. I think you can get good value. I think Emory Jones might be a good punt for them. He's playing right tackle at the moment, so I think that might be a good one to bring in. Yeah, I think that there's names for them, isn't there? But I just don't know whether they're going to get value later on in that draft. whether they get more value out of an edge rusher at that point. It's gonna be a tough one for them. Have you got any names from the quarterback perspective that you'd like to see them maybe bring in next year? Do you think Flacco is a name that you'd go after? Or
I mean, possibly there are guys that like that. I mean, you could look at. I would expect someone like Gardner Minshew to be, on his way from the Raiders. I can't imagine that he's going to be sticking around. So there's someone that you could have as just a backup that can just sit there and if you need to. And then obviously there are guys in the draft as well that you could look at. But I think you're going to be wanting to sort of almost treat it as like a bit of a day 2, day 3 pick, because you don't want to spend too much on it, which is why I'm not sure if you're necessarily going to get anyone who's going to be good enough in order to be able to really make the difference. So it does feel like free agency is the way forward. But again, they just don't have a great deal of money, so they can't really go out and do anything crazy. I think you need to somehow get yourself a quarterback who can almost be like a 1 year, $6 million deal or something like that is what you need. And obviously you're not going to get anything fantastic for that. So yeah, I think it's going to be, they've put themselves in a bit of a difficult situation.
Yeah, it's probably a Carson Wentz, Joe Flacco, Andy Dalton situation, isn't it?
But you see, them sort of guys is kind of what you need to do, and it goes to show how a poor decision was made this year because they haven't been able to do anything without Tua now.
Yeah, they've really, really struggled. We said this last year with the Jets as well, didn't we? Once Rodgers was out, it was just your team's done, it's over. And with the state that Tua's in, you cannot take that risk with him because there's always that factor that he will get concussed. It's going to be a thing. So there's going to be times where he might miss a period of the season, whether it's 2 or 3 games or whatever. You need to be able to bring someone in that can still stable the ship and keep you moving forward, like your Green Bay Packers did. Love was out for a little bit, and Malik Willis came in and won his games, and you're still in it. It could have gone the complete other way, and you could have been fighting in that division, battling against other people. So if they're going to keep up with the likes of the Bills, who we've said didn't have many holes, the Jets, who we said should be better, they've got to do something to keep with those guys, and what they're currently doing isn't quite right, is it?
No.
Well, that's that division complete, Adam. We'll move on to our